We've got everything you need to know about the coronation, from how the king followed tradition and how he modernized the ceremony.
I think something about these rituals being ancient, these traditions being almost 1,000 years old, or, it's really gives you goosebumps to look at this.
Plus, the Wales family dazzles over coronation weekend as Louis steals the show. And how does Prince Harry feel about his big return? Editor-in-chief of True Royalty TV, Nick Bullen, helps us break it all down.
Everybody knew he had a plane to catch. Everybody knew he was intended to get home. But there was a hope, I think, that he might be part of some of the family celebrations.
We got that plus so much more on today's Royally Us. Hey everyone, welcome to Royally Us. I'm Christina, and that is Christine. And wow, Christine, we watched history in the making, and we have so much to talk about.
It was so amazing. I mean, we'll definitely dive into it throughout the show, but we've been talking so much about it's coming up, it's finally happened, and it just absolutely blew me away.
It really did. Did you have a good coronation celebration?
Yes, yeah, we've had a lot of fun here, from sort of, the big excitement to even like a little village party in my little village. So it's been a lot of fun.
I love that so much. That is so great. All right, well, let's get into our royal roundup. And like we said, King Charles is officially king. The coronation took place on a rainy London day, but the pomp and pageantry was still not affected at all by that. The king took the oath and was crowned in front of 2,000 people at Westminster Abbey. So take a quick look.
Lord.
As we know, Prince George served as a page, and Prince William also took the oath of allegiance. So take a look at this.
I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and the faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
I mean, what a beautiful celebration, a beautiful ceremony. And we were saying, we really did watch history in the making.
I was teary-eyed so many times throughout this service. It was so moving. I think something about these rituals being ancient, these traditions being almost 1,000 years old, or, it's really gives you goosebumps to look at this. And so many things, the ancient spoon that they use, which was from the 11th century, the throne, which is sort of, this mystical, magical stone of Scone. Just everything about this ceremony really moved me.
It really did. And it was beautiful. Even the music, the choir that they brought in, that was from Harry and Meghan's wedding, and just mixing the old and the new. It just, they really did a really nice job. And also, obviously, Queen Camilla was crowned. I love that she was sitting there kind of fixing the crown, because you don't realize, I'm sure it's probably pretty heavy on the head.
It's so relatable. So, the way I could almost feel her, where, it's sitting in a funny way, and it's like pulling at your hair in a certain way, and she's trying to fix it. These crowns are tremendously heavy. I don't think we can really think about how much weight was literally on top of their heads. I love when she curtsies to her husband, the king, and it is sort of this funny, almost awkward, wobbly curtsy. And you see King Charles and Queen Camilla exchange a really sweet smile, because they both know how cumbersome this is.
Right. All I could think about, I'm sure, in their head was like, please don't trip. Please don't fall. Please don't. I couldn't even.
Do not fall over. Do not fall over.
Not fall over. But there was obviously a lot of people in attendance, 2,000 people, one of them being Katy Perry, who I loved, couldn't find her seat. This was like a great video that was going around on social media, being like, where am I sitting? I love that.
She has been such an amazing character throughout the weekend. She actually works really closely with a trust that King Charles works really closely with. So it's nice that there's sort of unusual friends. And it was great to see her throughout the weekend, from the coronation service to her amazing performance later at the concert.
Yeah. And of course, Prince Harry was in attendance. He had a moment with Princess Anne. It seemed like they had a fun little back and forth based on some of the photos. Obviously, he was sitting 3 rows back from his immediate family, but sitting with his cousins. But, it was nice that he showed up. We're going to talk a little bit more about him a little bit later in the show, but it was nice that he made the trip over. Left as soon as he could, but he did make the trip.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see them all there. He wasn't really shoved in the back. He's there with his cousins, with members of his family. It did seem like everyone was in good spirits when they arrived. But obviously, it is a long ceremony. There was one person who did not last the whole time.
Little Louis.
Little Louis, who looked so adorable. entering Westminster Abbey with his parents and his older sister, Charlotte. He stayed for a lot of the service because the press was informed that he was going to stay for some of the service, but eventually he would sort of, slip out so that he could have some 5-year-old time to be a bit silly and get those wiggles out. He was there for a long time. I kept watching the screen waiting for him to disappear. And actually he stayed for a good amount of the service before quietly slipping out a side door so that he could sort of relax and get some of his sillies out.
Yes, he relaxed before he put on another show up on the balcony, which I absolutely loved, as we remember from the Platinum Jubilee and those photos of him watching the flyover. But he was equally as expressive as he was the last time, but he was adorable. And this was such a poignant and beautiful moment up on the balcony. The first time that King Charles is taking this, famous picture with his family as king. And it really was. It was, and everybody still turned out despite it being such a rainy and gloomy day.
I mean, the weather could not have been worse. And actually, Friday was beautiful weather. Sunday was really nice weather. It was just Saturday morning that we really had that very British weather. But they say it's good luck. So what can you do?
What can you do? All right. Well, the weekend is not complete without some official photos. And following their crowning ceremony on Saturday, King Charles and Queen Camilla posed for official coronation portraits at Buckingham Palace. Photographer Hugo Bernand got behind the camera for the historic snaps. Now, he photographed King Charles and Queen Camilla's wedding back in 2005. So obviously they are very comfortable with him. They released 4 different photos. And in a statement, Charles said, "As the coronation weekend draws to a close, my wife and I just wanted to share our most sincere and heartfelt thanks to all those who have helped to make this such a special occasion. We pay particular tribute to the countless people who have given their time and dedication to ensuring that the celebrations in London, Windsor, and further afield were as happy, safe, and enjoyable as possible." He went on to add that to those who joined in the celebrations, whether at home, at street parties and luncheons, or by volunteering in communities, we thank you, each and every one of you. And it seems like, they just had a wonderful celebration everywhere. People all over the world were celebrating.
It really was. I mean, especially throughout the UK. I mean, there's bunting everywhere. You drive around, everywhere is decorated in Union Jacks and this red, white, and blue bunting. But it really was, there was a lot of community spirit. People like my village had a party. Almost every village had a little party where everyone got together. And then yesterday you saw people all over the place with this big help out, which was a big volunteering effort. Just to get everyone out there helping one another.
I love that so much. Well, we can't talk about coronation without talking about some fashion. Well, what did you think of Camilla's cream-colored, embellished Bruce Oldfield gown? This was so beautiful, and it actually honored her dogs a little bit as well.
This was such an amazing gown because when we first saw it, it just looked traditional white gown, embroidery, interesting. But as we were able to sort of look through the photos and talk, and reporters spoke to the designer, the gown features embroidered profiles of her rescue Jack Russell Terriers, Beth and Bluebell, near the hem of the skirt. You can't miss them as she sort of lifts her skirt. You see these amazing dog illustrations. We also saw embroidered names of her grandchildren on the front of that skirt. And along the hem towards the back, there's actually books embroidered within the fabric. So it's just all these things that are so important to Queen Camilla. It really gives a little bit of her personality. It wasn't sort of your basic, flowers and sequins. This was really, really a personal design for Camilla on such an important day.
I love that so much. All the things that she loves the most. I think that's fantastic. It's really sweet. And we have to talk about the Princess of Wales. Looked absolutely regal. Like she is like queen in the making. It really was. She looked fabulous in the formal robe over an ivory Alexander McQueen dress. We obviously know the history of her and Alexander McQueen goes way back. She honored the England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland with their embroidered roses, shamrocks, daffodils on her gown. But what did you think of this headpiece? We were talking about the tiaras, the headpieces. What did you think about this?
I have to say, it is a floral silver embellished headpiece. It is not a tiara. However, it is about as close to a tiara as humanly possible. Yes. And I actually loved it. I thought, I don't know if I would have preferred it over a tiara, but it was such an amazing choice. People really, sort of gasped when they saw it of what an interesting decision this was. It sort of plays into historically at Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. Her ladies in waiting wore these sort of floral, sequin, sparkly tiaras, and guests at that coronation also wore real tiaras. So this was an interesting amalgamation of ideas where it was decided that no one would wear a tiara. There would be no coronets at King Charles III's coronation. And so this is a really, really great play on that. I think people were happy. If you wanted a tiara, you still sort of got it. Yeah. But it still wasn't exactly, something out of the vault.
Oh, definitely. And I loved that Princess Charlotte wore pretty much the matching of her mother's. Like, this was just such an iconic mother-daughter moment.
That was Princess Charlotte had her, like, that was a real Queen Elsa moment with the cake and everything. You just know she's gone back to school today and been very popular. Everyone wants
100%.
And borrow her coronation gowns.
She is like the most well-behaved, 8-year-old little girl. She's always just so poised and collected at these events. And you can always tell that she's trying to guide Louis and, help everybody along. She seems like a fabulous young little girl. I love to see it.
We've seen her a few times over the weekend. I'm at a few different events, and she's so assured. She seems very confident, but very polite. And, she's not making silly faces quite like Louis is. Seems like she's trying to steer him in the right direction.
She is. She's being the protective older sister. All right. Well, moving on, following the crowning of the royal family, they gathered to commemorate the occasion at the official coronation big lunch. One day later, the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales attended the luncheon on the grounds of Windsor Castle. Hours before the coronation concert kicked off, other celebratory feasts were held across the United Kingdom. And while, like we said, they had all different different events, they all munched on Charles's signature dish, the coronation quiche. And I love this, that William also couldn't resist trying a can of Return of the King Coronation Ale, which was a special brew that featured his father's face on the label. He definitely had a nice little laugh about this one.
Yeah, I think that it was so nice to see the Prince and Princess of Wales sort of at their local street party in Windsor. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh also did the same thing. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie were out at big lunches. So these were amazing community building events. I mean, honestly, every village in my area had a big lunch, a coronation party on Sunday, and it just brought people together. I went to mine in my local village, and it was such an amazing excuse to bring, neighbors and communities together. And it really did what I think King Charles wanted it to do, which was to, encourage that sort of community building. And the best way to do that, I think, was to have members of the royal family going to their own community lunches, just sort of, encouraging people to do the same.
Yeah. And I think the walkabout in Windsor definitely surprised a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people were expecting the Prince and Princess of Wales to be, out there shaking hands. And it really was a great celebratory weekend. And at least the weather was nicer that day than it was on the coronation. And the weather seemed perfect for the coronation concert. As we know, the King and the Queen, they were joined by Prince William, Princess Kate, and their children. They sat front row in the VIP box as this musical event was held on the East Lawn of Windsor Castle. It was, Katy Perry performed, Lionel Richie, a host of other people, and also Prince William got up there to give a heartfelt speech to his father. Take a look.
As my grandmother said when she was crowned, coronations are a declaration of our hopes for the future. And I know she's up there, fondly keeping an eye on us, and she'll be a very proud mother.
I love how he tied Queen Elizabeth back into it, saying that she'd be very proud looking down at her son. And it really was. It was a beautiful event. Nicole Scherzinger was there, Andrea Bocelli, and, it seemed like a really fun night for everybody.
It was really fun. I think the program kind of entertained people of all ages. You had something modern, you had Shakespeare, everything in between. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun. I loved Prince William's dad joke at the beginning, saying that he will not go on all night long. And then they immediately cut to Kate, who sort of looks like, I cannot believe you just made that dad joke.
It's like, oh no.
Exactly.
You're like, I don't know him. Yeah. I love it. Well, now it is time to break down the royal rules and this coronation event even further. So joining us is royal historian. As you know, Gareth Russell knows everything, so he is here to break it down even further. Take a look. What was the biggest, because obviously this is all about tradition and things like that, but what was the biggest surprise to you about this coronation?
There were a few surprises, but I suppose from the historian's perspective, the thing that really surprised me was the amount of detail and thought that had gone into incorporating non-Christian traditions and also non-Protestant forms of Christianity. So for me, just on a personal basis, I found the Greek Orthodox choir really evocative and moving. And obviously, of course, Prince Philip was christened into the Orthodox religion. It's also worth pointing out that the king's great aunt Ella is a saint in the Russian Orthodox Church. So there's certainly, she was a nun who was murdered during the Russian Revolution. So there is a lot of connection with the Windsors and Orthodoxy, and we know that the king is fascinated by Orthodox theology. We also saw Cardinal Vincent Nichols perform a blessing. That's the first Catholic bishop or archbishop who's participated in a coronation there since 1553. And then when we saw various pieces of the coronation insignia being offered to the king for the first time by representatives of non-Christian faiths. We had first representatives of the Islamic community in the Commonwealth and then of the Jewish community. The pieces that they picked were very deliberately the pieces of the coronation regalia that don't contain Christian iconography and imagery. So there was a great deal of thought that went into it. I also was surprised, I suppose, because I've never, like most of us, I've never seen a coronation. I've certainly studied them. But this blending of the personal and the political and the theological, the modern and the innovative, I thought was pretty extraordinary. And there was, as we should have known, so this wasn't surprising, just so much attention to the history that went through it. And then also to a very different Britain from 1953, which I think we saw in those religious points I was mentioning.
Yeah. How do you feel like they honored the Queen during the ceremony as well?
Well, I think the whole thing, in a sense, is an honoring of her, because it's very much what she wanted. She wanted the monarchy to continue. I think the real moment of outright honoring her was Prince William's speech at the concert the next day, when he said, he spoke so movingly about his grandmother. Mm-hmm. And this was the first time we'd seen Prince William do a speech in a while. I mean, obviously, it hasn't been about him. There has been his grandmother's funeral and his father's accession and his grandmother's platinum jubilee. So this wasn't his time until this weekend to talk. So I think in that sense, that was where we saw William really emphasize the continuity and honor the Queen. And it was very personal, which I thought was interesting, rather than focusing solely on her legacy politically and culturally. It was about talking about a woman he and his family loved very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I loved him saying that, the Queen would be proud looking down, and I appreciated Prince William's dad jokes. I thought that was great.
They were great. Yeah, they did make me laugh.
I loved it.
Very good.
What did you think? A lot of this was about family as well, and integrating members of the family. Prince George served as a page. Princess Anne had a big role. Why do you think that was so important for King Charles as well?
Because it's obviously the central star, if you like, of the royal show is the monarch, but it is an event that needs the whole family to participate in it. I think it was quite interesting, even that non-working royals who aren't disgraced, and I'm thinking of the Duke of Sussex, they weren't pushed far back. I mean, the furthest back we went was 3 rows. Mm-hmm. So I think there was really an attempt to put them front and center, partly to make the monarchy, to remind people it is a family institution. I think sometimes there was a section of people who believed it began and ended with Elizabeth II. Mm-hmm. And that was through no fault of Elizabeth II either. I mean, she was an extraordinary head of state. But I would say that really what the King was doing there was reminding people of the family institution. And also, I think the family seem to have become closer over the last few months and years. Although grief often has a way of doing that for families. They were, Philip and Elizabeth's death quite close together. Yes,
I love that. It was a modern event, but also kept to tradition, and it really was. It was something to watch. It really was. Well, somebody that wasn't watching this from inside Westminster Abbey was Sarah Ferguson. Let's spill some royalty, because she sent King Charles and Queen Camilla a sweet note regarding the coronation after she was left off the guest list. She wrote on Instagram, "Sincerest congratulations to their majesties, the King and the Queen." As we know that Sarah Ferguson, who was obviously married to Prince Andrew, she had been excluded from the Westminster Abbey guest list, and she spent the coronation Saturday at home with her dog dogs, including the corgis that she inherited from Queen Elizabeth. She organized a celebratory meal for residents of the Manor Care Home, which is a nursing facility for Windsor locals with dementia, which is really nice. She focused her low-key celebration, which she watched over on television, and but she did attend the coronation concert.
This is she's such an unexpected royal character.
Yeah.
And people seem to still be really fond of her because she's a bit quirky and fun. What I loved about this is that she really redirected it to some of the charity work that she's doing, the dinner she arranged at the care home, the way she's supporting people in her community, her work with the children's books, with her own adult fiction books. And it was an interesting example, perhaps for some people that we might talk about later in the show, of how to make sure that your work is at the heart of what people see you doing.
So it's so true. It really is. She could have been bitter and upset that she wasn't invited, but instead turned it around because she knew probably people were going to be wondering what she was doing. And she actually did something really fabulous and for a good cause.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was an interesting story. So Prince Harry's ghostwriter, J.R. Moringer, he recalled in a piece published by The New Yorker how his biggest argument with Harry stemmed from edits to the book Spare that they worked on together. He explained about how a passage about the Duke of Sussex's grueling military exercises in England turned into a fight at 2 a.m. over Zoom, saying, although this wasn't the first time that Harry and I had argued, it felt different. It felt as if we were hurtling towards some kind of decisive rupture, in part because Harry was no longer saying anything. So Harry wanted to include this vile dig that a pretend terrorist said to him about his late mother, Princess Diana. J.R. Moringer did not want to put this in, saying he was just glaring into the camera. Finally, he exhaled and calmly explained that all of his life, people had belittled his intellectual capabilities. And this flash of cleverness proved that even after being kicked and punched and deprived of sleep and food, he had his wits about him. He did go on and say some really nice things about Harry as well, that they took him into their home in California. Meghan would bring him snacks and food and, visit him often. So they did have a nice relationship. But I'm sure working on a book like this, you're going to have some disagreements.
Absolutely. I think that, it's not, especially since Harry's story is so personal, but his ghostwriter just is sort of creating a product and there's not as much heart into it on his end of things. And that's why ghostwriters tend to create great books. It provides balance for that. Unfortunately, I think this is an example of where Harry and Meghan, can be held to a different standard, and that if this was anybody else, this wouldn't have been quite such a story. And like you said, he goes on to say how they were really lovely. They were at his home. Meghan was so kind to him, but we're not hearing that. We're only hearing this sort of dramatic, argument that they've had. Mm-hmm. And it's, people really have to be careful when they talk about Harry and Meghan because the media can be so ruthless.
No, it's definitely because when I first read that headline, I was like, oh no, he went in on Harry. And it's actually just a very short piece of the entire article. But yes, that's the clickiest headline. That's what people are going to want to read.
Exactly. But I would definitely encourage people to go and read the full piece because I'm sure so many people have just read this story about them arguing, but there is a lot more to it about their relationship and that experience.
Definitely. All right. Well, Prince Harry, like we said before, he appeared at the coronation. Everybody was watching what he was doing and how he was acting and how he presented himself. And we actually spoke to a body language expert, Tracy Brown, about how he was acting at the coronation. And she told us that he hasn't changed his mindset toward the family from anything that I've seen. He's on the same page that he's always been. I don't see any improvement. She said that he was guarded, kind of protecting himself. He had his hand on his on the lower part of his stomach, which she said that she's noticed before that he does in the past, and that his demeanor coming into the church showed the same old patterns from Harry. That his smile was a little crooked, maybe a little contempt there, but that no one's deviated from anything and no one's patched anything up. I mean, we can kind of tell that anyway, since he kind of left pretty early. But, he did seem in some photos, though, in good spirits. He seemed happy to be there, at least, on the outside. But who knows? I mean, he did leave shortly after. It was Archie's 4th birthday. We know that he wanted to get back to London as quickly as he could to try to spend some time with him. But it was nice that he showed up.
I think there was, a lot of politeness to his attendance. I think he was probably happy to see some of his cousins, you know, a little, but ultimately, I don't think he really wanted to be there, but he knew it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, with the time difference and everything, he was able to rush back for Archie's birthday. So Archie probably had both of his parents when he blew out his birthday candles, which I think is a sweet silver lining, even though Harry must have been completely exhausted.
Right. I can't even imagine what a whirlwind.
I know.
And even though we didn't see Meghan at the coronation, there's photos of her taking a hike the next day out with some friends. So I'm sure everybody was wondering, was she watching it on TV? Did she wake up at, it would be like 2:00 in the morning, LA time. So I don't know. Something tells me she probably hit the snooze button, but
something tells me she did not tune in, but
definitely not. All right. Well, to get further insight into how Harry was feeling at the coronation, we caught up with editor-in-chief of True Royalty TV, Nick Bullen. Take a look. And obviously, Prince Harry was in attendance. Did you hear how the royals felt about him leaving so quickly after the coronation?
So I heard from somebody who was actually involved on the day that up until the morning, nobody really knew what Harry's plans were going to be for that afternoon. And I think everybody knew he had a plane to catch. Everybody knew he was intending to get home. But there was a hope, I think, that he might be part of some of the family celebrations back at the palace. So I think that, there was a sadness that he wasn't part of the fuller day. But they all knew he was going to get that plane. And I think nobody was quite sure, even on the morning, quite what a role he'd play or not. But perhaps when he realised he was sitting behind Princess Anne's rather large feather, he decided to get the plane home.
Yeah, he's like, gotta run, gotta go. Do we know if there was any interactions with him and the family prior to the coronation? I know he got in, night before, so it was, I think, like 28 hours in London. But do we know if there was any sort of talk or anything like that? Because I think the last time we spoke, there was hope that maybe he would sit down and talk to King Charles, prior to the coronation.
So I don't know for absolutely certain, but my understanding is he didn't have any interactions with the Prince and Princess of Wales, but that he did have a conversation with his father the night before. But, I don't absolutely know that. That's just what I've heard from sources at the palace. There was a dinner on the Friday night at a private members club in London called Oswald's that a lot of the rest of the family went to. The Yorks went to it. Princess Anne went to it with her children. The Attenboroughs went to it with their children. So a lot of the extended royal family were at this private dinner. And there were no shots of Harry arriving at that dinner. So it looks like he didn't go. Maybe he came in through a back door, who knows? But it appears that he kept a very, very low profile during the whole piece. And, on the day itself, he walked in with the York girls, but he looked very much alone. He walked down that aisle on his own. He was seated next to Jack Brooksbank, Princess Eugenie's husband, and on his other side was Princess Alexandra. So he was definitely not anywhere near the sort of the core family that he could have had an interaction with. So I think it was a pretty low profile.
Do you feel like this is the last time we'll probably see him in London for quite some time?
There seems to be no reason for him to come back to London anytime soon. I think, Meghan certainly is showing no interest in coming back. And there doesn't seem to be anything in the diary to bring Harry back. But I think, what's interesting is it's possibly the beginning of the end of the Sussex interaction with the royal family. He's done Spare. They've made the documentary. They've done the Oprah interview. How much more is there to say? And I think that was what was very interesting about the coronation. It felt like Harry and Meghan were just sort of a sidebar to all of this. This was absolutely history, the future, and it felt like the family had sort of put a line in the sand and say, right, we are moving forward.
I felt that too. I got that feeling as well. Just as just watching it, it just seemed like that. Not that he was an afterthought, but yes, just another member of the family. And you see the Wales as front and center, and then that's the future. That's what they're kind of focusing on.
Yeah, those three children, Charlotte, George, Louis, are becoming more and more photogenic. They're becoming more and more the story. So I think every year that they get closer to adulthood, the more the Sussexes drift away from being sort of central to the story. I think, I hear that the king made a toast to Archie because it was his birthday. But even the way the king said that, wherever he is, it was sad. And I think that's the sad piece, is that these two grandchildren aren't part of the story. I think that is sad for them, sad for the king, but the Sussexes have made their decision on that.
Right. It is nice that he made the toast, though. Even though Harry wasn't there, he is acknowledging. I mean, it is his grandson. I'm sure, like you said, there is a tinge of sadness that he doesn't have that same relationship that he has with George, Charlotte, and Louis.
Absolutely. And I think, the Queen is really close to her grandchildren, as we saw. And I think, the King and the Queen family is really important to them. And I think they would like they've, on a number of occasions, they've reached out to Harry and Meghan to sort of say, look, you are very much part of the family. That very first speech that the king made when he became king was how much, he loved Harry and Meghan and he wished them well in their new life. So I think the royal family here do keep trying to reach out, and particularly the king does. But it seems to be landing on deaf ears at the moment.
All right, well, let's get into our pint-sized palace. And like you were talking about before, on May 8th, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis made a surprise appearance with their parents to volunteer at the 3rd Upton Scout Group in Slough. So the outing marked the first ever official royal engagement for Prince Louis. Very exciting. He marked this one off the list. And as we know, he has joined families for outings, the coronation, the Jubilee, things like that. This was the first official royal duty that he had to do. So he was spotted shoveling dirt into a wheelbarrow and then moving it. Prince George used some power tools for a project alongside his father. Princess Charlotte was focused on painting, and it seemed like this was a really fun outing for everybody.
It was a really, really cool volunteering event with their local scouts group. It was great seeing them all get involved. They made s'mores, and Prince Louis had some really strong feelings about how delicious those s'mores were. But there's so many video clips from this visit to Slough. They look like any other family. It's so very nice to see them. They're normal, down-to-earth young family. The kids could not be any cuter, especially Louis. I think I'm so soft for Louis because my son is about the same age, but I think he's such a character. It's so charming to watch him.
He really is. And it's so great. This was a giving back event, and they encouraged everybody to kind of give back to the community, after the coronation. And this was such a great way to do so. And it seemed like the kids had a lot of fun. And like you said, I'm sure everybody, when those kids went back to school today, they were the talk of the town.
They weren't already. I mean, they must be so popular at school, but especially after this weekend, there's a lot of people who want to, sit next to them at the lunch table.
Totally. Who's setting up a play date with Prince George? Yeah. All right. Well, that is it for this week's episode of Royally Us. Christine, we made it through the coronation. We've talked about it. Check it off the list.
Now we can get back into the regular royal news updates. I'm still so excited to get through all the fun things that are to come.
Definitely. All right. Well, everybody keep commenting, keep subscribing, and we will see you guys next week. For more news content and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.